Hey Parker, it's April 1st, so happy April Fool's Day. I'm not the biggest fan of April Fool's Day because it's basically a long day of me second-guessing literally every news headline and every news story I see. Everything everyone tells me, it's a long line of me just like being like, well, it's April 1st, is this real? But in the spirit, I'm gonna share some of my favorite April Fool's Day hoaxes. These are in a particular order. Number 1. UFO lands in London. This actually happened on March 31st, 1989. Thousands of motorists driving on the highway outside London looked up into the air to see a glowing flying saucer descend in the city. It eventually, landed, and people were actually calling the police to warn them about the impending alien invasion. It, went so far as, a door opened and someone in a silver, suit came out and police ran away, and it just ended up being a hoax. Number 2, April 1st, 1976, BBC Radio 2 had a British astronomer, Patrick Moore, announced that at 9:47 a.m. that day, a once-in-a-lifetime astronomical event was going to occur. It ended up being he was like, well, the planets are going to be aligned in this way, and Pluto's going to be behind Jupiter, and people actually started, if they jumped at a specific time, 9:47, they would feel a strange floating sensation. And then people actually started calling into the radio station and saying that they felt the strange floating sensation and that they were floating around. And it's amazing. And so this also goes to show how powerful, our minds can be. I can't remember what number we're at already. 1988, Burger King announced a specifically left-handed Whopper for all of the left-handed Americans, and that the burger was basically a special burger, and all of the condiments were rotated 180 degrees for the benefit of a left-handed customer. Because of this press release, many customers requested a special right-handed burger. 1998, Alabama changed the value of pi from 3.141592 and etc. to 3.0, and they called this value the biblical value of pi, and it ended up being a parody of legislative attempts to circumscribe the teaching of evolution written by a physicist, Mark Boslow. April 1st, 1967, Swiss Radio interrupted a regularly scheduled program with a news flash that U.S. astronauts had landed on the moon. For the next hour, listeners heard a series of elaborately staged updates, complete with reports from correspondents around the world with experts. People thought that this was real. Telephone lines were jammed. U.S. authorities in Switzerland were confused, and they began to celebrate. And then the broadcast concluded with a report that the moon ship would take off from the moon at 7 p.m., and listeners were told they could see it return to Earth by watching from a high vantage point away from city lights. In cities, a lot of people, left the cities to go to, the nearest mountains to try and watch this moon ship fly away, and then, 2 years later, people actually did land on the moon. In a little bit of a more morbid sense, 1971, Texas House Representatives unanimously passed a resolution honoring Albert DeSalvo, noting he had been officially recognized by the state of Massachusetts for his noted activities and unconventional techniques involving population control and applied psychology. Texas politicians were embarrassed when it was revealed to them that DeSalvo was better known as the Boston Strangler. Resolution was submitted by someone who wanted to demonstrate that no one reads bills or resolutions, and they pretty much proved their point. In 1950, a newspaper announced that a flying saucer had crashed and ran a photo of a small one-legged extraterrestrial that had supposedly been found near the wreckage by American soldiers. And so, so many people wrote in that the paper had to publish a disclaimer several days later saying that it wasn't real. An unknown informant sent a clipping of the photo to the FBI, and the agency duly filed it away. The photographer who originally took the photo had to reveal that the alien was in fact his 5-year-old son, posing with local soldiers from the U.S. Air Base. And so, Parker, these are some of my favorite things. I love all these crazy hoaxes and stuff, but I will see you tomorrow. I love your hair. DFTBA.